So today we're going to cover something that you will do a lot, and that is how to bring an image. And that's part of the reason also why I'm recording this, because I guarantee you that you're going to be doing this, right? The idea is, how do you bring in an image into a Rhino and you scale it up into what's called the 1-to-1 scale, right? That means that whatever units and whatever distances and dimensions you're using on the software, those are the real life dimensions, right? That 10 feet, right, on the image equal to 10 feet on the software, right? And I have a file right here that I have already, I was using to sort of prepare the class, right? But I'll take you guys through a new file, right? And remember, we're going to be using the images that you have stored, right, for your properties. And I think I should have, and again, I only have one property, but as you can see right here, right on my screen, I went ahead and saved that image. Remember that we're using right now for convenience, right? These images that have the 1000 scale bar, right? The largest 1000 scale bar that you can get off of Google Maps, right? And we will be using for right now the map version of this, right? Is that what this is called? The map. Let me go open an area. Yes, the map one, right? Which is kind of what we're doing, right? It's a diagrammatical representation of the city, of a zone, right? Of an area, right? We know, right, that as much as we like green in parks, the green in this memorial park, right, it's not necessarily that color, right? I-10 and Patriot Freeway are not yellow, right? And the streets are not white, right? That is part of the idea of being diagrammatic, right? I mean, you are taking a set of information and giving it perhaps a different form of representation, right? So, and that's basically what we're going to do, right? But in a much more developed way, in the sense that you can change the colors as much as you want, right? Think about this as a little coloring book. That's how I like to see it, because then we will use Illustrator to add color, right? Which is then illustration, right? Illustrating the image itself, right? So the first thing that we want to do, and let me just minimize this right here, it's open a new file, right? So I go ahead and open Rhino. Remember, if you're working off of Rhino 5, my screen and your screen may not be exactly the same, right? But the commands should work should be the same, and there should be just slight variations. Any questions, please just reach out, and I'll try to clear out for you, or give you the way of approaching such action on a older version, right? So here I am Rhino open screen right here. Now the first thing, right, that we'll want to check, and it should be a habit as well, right? Anytime that you're working on a project, right, is you should check your units, right? So if you go ahead and type units, right, or the way that we can do this, right, is by typing units, right? Units brings up this screen right here, right? Now, it breaks them down into 3 categories. As you can see, one of them is grayed out. That means that right now that is not habilitated for us, which is fine, because the 2 areas that we want to keep an eye on, right, are the first one and the last one, all right? So the first one will be the model units, okay? What do we have right now for model units? Millimeters, right? So again, for the most part, right, I think there's been only slight times with really large projects, I think, that we did in Studio 3 or Studio 2, that we have a really large area that we're using, I think, engineering scale in meters. For the most part, right, I mean, we are in the US of A, right? So we use feet and inches, right, which are called your imperial units, right, versus your metric, right? So it's really important that you make sure that those are correct, because things can get out of scale really easily, right? If you start modeling, let's say, in millimeters, you can always go back and change them, right? You can always go back and scale it up and down, but again, that's work that you want to avoid giving yourself, right? Having to go back and like, oh man, my units are wrong, right? So we drop down menu. I'm gonna go into feet right here, all right? Feet. And then the next thing that we want to change is your distance display, right? That one right now as well is giving it to you in decimal, right? You want to change that to feet and inches. Okay, that's the second the second thing that we need to look for, and it's the third option, and it's the third little bullet right there that you habilitate, feet and inches. Now, there's also the display precision component, which is this part right here. For our purposes, the 1/8 is fine, especially right now that we're going to be working at such a large scale, which is city blocks, right? I mean, to measure something to the 1/8 of an inch, it's just really not necessary at this point. However, I want to point it out. If you start working with really, really detailed things, right? I mean, just know that Rhino is a really strong software and is used for anything from space or aeronautics, I guess, modeling to a jewelry, right? So a lot of jewelry is actually modeled in this software. So that's actually where we have really, really precise units, right? So again, the lower that you go on this drop-down menu, right, the more precision that you get with your units. And we're going to be using our units right now. So for right now, the 1/8, absolutely fine. Right, absolutely fine. And I think for the most part, that should be fine. But again, it might be the case for whatever reason that in your laptop or your station, the units might be different. So I click OK. And you want to do this before you start drawing again, because if you do that once there's objects in there, you're going to get a menu that is going to ask you if you want to scale up or down based on what you have there in your file. If you want to scale up or down your drawing, right? And again, I find that moments like that are times that you can start losing accuracy on your drawings, right? So again, that's why we want to set that up automatically, the first thing. All right, now I'm going to maximize my screen, right? So I double click on top view, scroll out a little bit, right? The command in order to bring in an image, right? I think I'm just realizing that they changed it. I think if you guys type picture, I think you guys should get picture frame. That was originally the name of the command. I think now it's just, is that right, Luis? Right, if you type picture, right, you get picture frame. In this new version, I think they just narrated down to picture, which I think is fine, right? If you click enter, right, this menu appears, right? In this menu, what do we have to do? Well, we have to navigate, right, to find the image that we want to import into our file, right? And most of the times these images are for reference, right? We'll reference the image so that you can trace them or work off of them. I like to think of this as if you were working with a light table, right? And you print something and then you put some piece of tracing paper on top of it and you draw on it, on your tracing paper, right? So again, I'm going to bring in my image, right? In this case is the map view, right? I hit open, right? Now your cursor, right, turns into the crosshair right there, right? Like that. Now, if you look at this, right, it's asking you, right, it's prompting you. The command line right here is asking you, right, first corner of picture. All right. So if we click, if we do a click, right, notice that you then get sort of what you get when you use the rectangle command, right? And then it says other corner or length, right? And for right now, we can just click. Good. Right? So we have one image. We have one image in our file. Now, the next thing, right, that we actually want to keep track of, right, is the size of such image. So that again, we're working with our one-to-one units. Right? So we want to use our distance command so that we measure what we have on the screen and use the scale command so that we can scale the image accordingly. All right? What do I mean by that? Well, if I type units, right, which I think the manual already covered units a little bit, or distance, I'm sorry, the distance command. If you type distance, right, enter, right, notice it's asking me, right, first point of distance. And what I use as my check, right, what keeps me in check, again, is, again, your graphical scale. And that's why, again, it's really important that you have this within the drawing and that it is actually part of it. Right? You don't want it to be two separate images, right? Sometimes that happens, that you have the map and then you have the scale separately. You want them to be together, right? I mean, they're bonded together, right? So I type distance and I'm going to use my distance as well as my ortho setup right here, right? To measure this bar right here, and notice that my cursor, right, I can place it right on the scale bar, but actually I like to place it somewhere down here. Now your crosshair, right, might look different than mine, right? Mine is covering the entire screen. There's a setting that we can use. Regardless, right, the idea is, do you place it right in the middle, right there of that scale bar, and you pull, right, your cursor towards the end of such a graphical scale, right? And we click, right? What happened, right? Nothing really got drawn, but if you again, right, or my command line, right, it gives me a distance equal, right? It's telling you, right, how much does that measure? Remember, we're on the digital world, we're on the digital screen, right? So for all we know, we can fit the entire world in this file right here, right? So it's really easy to lose track of size, right, or in proportion. So this is really off, right? I mean, it's telling me that this bar right now measures 13 feet. How much should that bar measure? 1,000 feet, right? This bar should measure 1,000 feet. So we're way up, right? So that means we need to blow it up, right? Like enlarge it, super enlarge it, right? So we use our distance command, right, to check our units, right? Our size, perhaps, maybe it's more accurate. And then we're going to use our scale command to actually blow up this image to the size that it should be, right? So I type scale, right? You'll see that there's a number of scales, right? There's the scale 1D, scale 2D, right? We use all of them, but for right now, we're gonna use scale. Just know that the 1D and the 2D, that means direction, right? Think about enlarging something, right, on the X, on the Y, and on the Z. That's what the first scale does. The next one, while the scale 1D, it only does one direction, right? You can think about, I like to think about it about stretching, although it's not the right word to use, right? But scale 1D will allow you to pull something, right, on one direction, scaling it, resize it on one direction. So I'll go ahead and select scale, right? Let's look at our bar, right? Select objects to scale, right? Well, the objects, what is the object that we want to scale? What are the image, right? So I select the image. Notice that I can just click on it, right? Again, my screen is kind of bright, but this image turned yellow, right? Yellow because it has been selected and it's highlighted, right? Select objects to scale, period. Press enter when done. Okay, Rhino, I am done, right? Now, base point, period. Press enter for automatic, right? Our base points, it just means that's where the image is going to grow from, right? That's the best way that I can explain it right now. It starts making more sense as you use the command more, right? So in this case, right, I'll just like to select the origin. And again, sometimes there is the question, right? Well, should I select the end of the bar, right, which is sort of there, or should I move towards the center? I like to do center. I just like to do center more or less of the image right there, or the bar. I'm sorry, right? So that's my start right there. Now it says the command line, right? Scale factor or first reference point, right? Well, my reference point, it is the end, right, of such scale, right? So it would be there, right? Now, as soon as I do the second click, right, notice that now my image moves as I move my cursor, right? And I can, if I move it, let's say to the right or outwards, it scales up. If I move it inwards or left to the left, right, it gets smaller, right? Now, the next thing that it's asking me for, right, it's a second reference point, right? This reference point now is the size or the length that the image should be, right? So let's see how this works, right? So if I type 1,000, right, feet, um, as a practice, right, generally, let me get to the habit of actually including the units, right? And what do I mean by that? I'll write it right here. So I'm just going to use X and color, right? And And they work just like that on the software. Right? So right now our units are set to feet, right? So we technically don't need to be redundant and put the apostrophe right there. But call me over kind of I just like to make sure that it is what I need it to be. All right. So I just do 1,000 feet, enter. Right. And again, our image grew, right? Our image blew up. Right? If you kept track of what happened on the screen. If not, right, which is okay, right? How can we double check if this was correct? The distance command, right? Thank you, Luis, right there. So, okay, so we have tried scaling this up, right? We go back and type distance again, right? And whatever you're doing, either you're doing the start of the bar or the center of the bar, whatever you're doing, just be, how do you call it? Just be, do the same. Consistence. Thank you. That's the word, consistence, right? So measure from there, right, to there. All right. Now, how accurate you want to be about this, or concerned about this? Well, it just depends, right? I mean, again, notice that right now, the part right where I click originally, and then on the second time that I did run the distance command, it's not exactly the same place, right, that I'm measuring, right? So right now, what do I get as a distance? I get 998 feet. Right, with 4 inches and with 4 1/8 of an inch, right? So pretty close, right? And I can guarantee you, if I do another distance, right, and I click maybe a little bit off right there, I'll get a different distance, right? Now I'm at 995, right? So it's kind of like a never-ending circle, right? But for the purposes of this exercise, we're good, right? Now this image, right, is to the what scale? 1:1, right? That means that whatever, if I go out there and measure the Chelsea Street right here, right, from this distance to this distance, right? If I go there right now physically and measure it, right, it will be pretty close to about 55 feet, right? 55 feet of what I have right there, right? So this distance command, right, it's really, really helpful as well, right? Not to be confused with the dimension command, DIM, right? DIM, right, what's going to give you is your dimensions shrink like that. And for our purposes, right, we just want to check right there, but we don't want to write, right? This actually gets thrown there into the file, and we don't want that, right? And as a matter of fact, it's actually really helpful to get the distance right here up on the bar, right? So again, anytime you want to measure something, right, distance, right? Let's say, what's the size of this block, right? Well, I measure from there to there, right? This block is about 147 feet. You can maybe even round it up to 148 or even 150 feet, right? This block is 150 by about 430 feet. All right. So right there away, you can see how you can start extracting real information or real world information from an image. Right. And sometimes you might get a JPEG, sometimes you might get a PDF, you might get all sorts of drawings, right? And this is a way that you can scale them. Bless you. Right. So good. Right. We have created, actually, right, I'll go back to this new file, but we have set up our units, we have set up our picture or picture frame, right? We have used scale and distance to verify all this. Now let's go back to this new file kind of thing, right? Because I skipped something really important, right? I opened up a few new file, but what did I skip or did not do? Name it, right? Name it while I save it, right? So let's do that, right? Because again, right now it's not a big deal. I don't have a lot of things, right? But who likes to do work again? Let's say that someone unplugs my computer or my battery dies, right? And I have to start all over again, right? And I have no file, right? So, or no save file. So let's go ahead and type save, right? Let's go ahead and I named it P1 start, all right? Project 1 start. Let's be a little bit more specific one. P1 image trace. Okay. And that way I don't have to overwrite the file that I have there. So for you guys, let's use that, right? P1 image trace. And we're gonna do all our images on the same file, right? Just so that we can use the same layers and we don't have to be jumping back from file to file. Again, 3 things that I always ask you guys to bear in mind is the file name, the location, and the type of file that you're doing, right? This is anytime that you use a save, right? So location, right? This is either your drive, your flash drive, or your desktop, right? In this case, I think I have our class folder right here, right? P1. Location file name, which again we have set up to be P1 underscore image trace. And then save as type, well, of course, it's already set up to Rhino 6. Now, this is where I want to point out, if you're going to be working back and forth between Rhino 5 and Rhino 6, which is what we have at school, 5, and then perhaps 6 at home, just be very mindful, right, what version you're saving, right? That means that if you have Rhino 6 at home, whenever you're working at home, save it right here on this save as type as a Rhino 5 if you're going to be open it here at school. If you save it as a 5 and you're going to open on a 6, there's no problem, right? That is compatible, right? But you cannot open a newer file version on an older software version, okay? So I'll leave it at 6, but that's where, again, if you need to downgrade the version of your file, that's where you can find it, okay? So I'll go ahead and click save. And automatically, right, your bar right here at the top, all the way to the top, right, gives you now the name of the file, right? So let's not forget about that, and all that right here to our notes, right? File, right? Of course, we open up the file, let's do a file. Okay, so now we're ready to create layers, right? Let me pause this real quick. All right, guys. So right now, right, how many layers do I have? 1, right? And what's the name of it? Default, right? It's a default layer that you're always gonna get, right? So we need to start working with layers, right? Let's create some of this, right? Remember, the way that I like creating layers right here, it's under new layer, right? Let's name this layer, right? Ref image. What does REF stand for, right? Reference image. Create a new layer, reference image. Let's create a new layer. All right, let's call this street grid. Let's create a new layer, call it city blocks. Oops, blocks. Let's create a new layer, call it green areas. And let's create a new layer, right, and call it amenities, right? Amenities. And this amenities layer right now, we're gonna actually create what's called sub layers with them. But for right now, we'll have that. Let's create actually a new layer, right? Call it distance radius. And we might need to create more layers as we move forward. And if we do, we'll go ahead and create new layers, right? Now, let's actually have some fun, I guess, on with colors, right? This color idea, it's up to you. I like for you guys to start, um, you know, experiencing how to add colors to this. So the ref image, again, you don't have to use the ones that I use, but I can walk you through what I maybe like. At least the ref image, I like to use something null, right? Like such as the gray right there. Street grid, and again, once you start drawing, right, these colors change, right? Perhaps you're like, well, that was too bright, that's this or that. For right now, right, city grid, right, maybe something along this colors right there. City blocks, right, maybe I'll jump over here. For right now, it doesn't really matter, we can fine tune them as we move through, right? Green areas, perhaps, you know, it's worth maybe just doing that, doing some green, right? Not a big fan of that. There we go, green. Amenities, right? For right now, I'll just give it a color. We'll see how that works with the sub layers. And then the distance radius. The distance radius, I do would like for it to be red. All right, so again, remember, you can pull from the rainbow, rainbow donut, or you can just select from the menu right here, right? In this case, for example, I just want red, so I just select red and hit OK. All right, so we have a number of colors right there, a set of colors that at any point we can change. Now, remember, this little arrow, what does that mean? Correct, right? That means that that layer is selected, and more accurately, that layer is active, right? That's the layer that you're going to be drawing on, right? So the first thing that I'm actually going to do is going to lock, right, my reference image, right? Why? Because, right now, this image, right, it's moving, right? And again, I could be moving something or delete something, and all of a sudden my image goes away. The problem with that is that you would have to bring back the image, and you have to rescale it. And to get it exactly the same size as you had before, it's kind of a challenge. All right, so you really just want to not mess with that reference image, since this is really the one driving everything that you'll be drawing right now. Now, why is it still moving if I already locked the layer? Correct, right, Jonathan? It's not assigned to that layer yet, right? So how can I do that, right? Well, remember, if I click on an object, right, and I go into its properties right here, it tells you its properties, of course, right? The third option is right there, layer. There's a drop-down menu, right? We can select ref image, right? Now we try moving it, nothing happens, right? And that's what you want, right? You want it to just stay there, buddy. Just stay put, right? And as a matter of fact, at some point we're actually going to turn it off, right? And we'll be using the visibility option right there. Okay, good, right? So I have my property right there, right? So the first thing, right, that we're actually going to be drawing, right, it's the street grid, right? So I'll go ahead, right? Really important. Let's make sure that you activate that layer, right? Street grid, and then street grid. Okay. And now, right, the name of the game, right, or the idea of this is that we actually draw what we have there, right? Remember, you can draw anything on any layer, and then you can reassign any line or object into its own layer, okay? In case things, you know, we're working on the wrong layer, right? So how do we do this? Well, we use, right, what we have learned so far in class, right? And I'll show you what this is now. There is no specific recipe, and I really, this kind of exercises, I like to think about it as a game, right? What's the most efficient and fastest way of drawing this accurately? Okay, accurately. That's a big factor right there. I'll show you what I mean, right? So I can start right with one of the most simple commands, right, which is my line command. All right, so remember, right now I am tracing the street, right? The streets, right? So we can do that. Now, again, notice, right, that I don't have to place my cursor, right? And again, this is all sort of a technique, personal technique and personal preference that you will be developing, right? So right now, right, my ortho is on, right? My ortho is on, right? So actually I'm going to turn it off. It seems like it, right? Because I can see, right, that actually that street is not as perpendicular or straight as I might visually appear. All right, so I'll go ahead and do that right there. Right, so I have pulled a line right from that origin, right, or that beginning of that line right there to here. Okay, good. So far, so good. Right, now I need to make another line right here. Now the idea is that streets, right, are parallel, right? I mean, some of them change, right? And again, this is all work by hand, right? They're made by hand, right? But if that is the case, right, this is the moment that we can actually use copy and the ortho option right there on, so that I select this line, enter, and I make a copy of it, right? And I can drop it there, right? And I'm gonna exit of it right now just to talk about this a little bit, right? So I have created, right, this set of parallel lines, right, that are giving me right now the width of a street, which name I do have, which is Mars Street, right? I think that's an 8 right there, Mars Street, right? So based on this, right, I can type distance, right? I can use my OSNAP, right, my OSNAP on the bottom and my end command, so that I can use this end and this other end, right, to check what? Well, the size of this street, right? So this case, right, it says 41 and a quarter, right? Is that street really 41 and a quarter? Unless we go there and measure, we're not gonna know, right? But it should be pretty close to it. Maybe it's 40 feet, right? Maybe it's 42, right? It's all about also, right, the quality of the image that you have, right? Because if I start zooming in really, really close, some of you guys, right, and this is where a lot of personal criteria comes into play, right? Perhaps, you know, Raven, right? She's like, actually, Munoz, actually, if I was me, right, that line would go actually there, right? Rather than having it where you had it. Right? And if I do that, right, let's see how much this has changed, right? So it went from 41 and a quarter to, wow, 33 feet, right? It's a lot, right? So again, for the purposes of this exercise, right, the accuracy, right, as long as we are within some reasonable, right, you know, size of this, we should be fine. Right? And again, this is part of the thing that you start, the more that you do this, right, the less that you kind of hesitate about it, right? So for right now, I'm gonna leave it at that, right? So I just started doing it. Now I do know, right, that this lines or this street should be parallel, right? I mean, for the most part, right? So I can and by the way, right, I do like to work with round off numbers. What do I mean by that? Let me just go back to this. If I do a distance, right, from that end to that other end, I have 41 and 3/8. I really, really, really doubt, right, that someone actually, when they were laying these streets, right, someone say, make sure that street has a 3/8 at the end, right, as a fraction. I really doubt it, right? What I like to do is have round off numbers, right? So what would I do? I would actually delete one line, right? And I would actually use my copy command one more time. I can select the line, enter, and I can click and then move it. I can actually specify, right? Copy it 41 feet, enter off of that, right? Enter. If I do now a distance, right, that is exactly 41 feet, right? And I'll repeat that, right? Let's say that actually now I want to make this other street, which is Radford Street, right? So I can use my copy command to bring one of these lines, right, and bring it over here. Now maybe, right, what if I do my distance before I do my copy, right? So if I type distance, enter, right, and I click from there, right, and I bring my cursor there, right, I can click, right, and it's 429 and 5 inches. Well, I can call, right, that I'm just gonna say I like that to be a 430. I'm just gonna make the number 430 feet, right? So I type copy, enter, select line. And again, remember, don't worry if you're not getting it right now, right? We're going to break into the lab in a minute so that you can work on this, right? Enter. And then I click one point. Notice that it's not even on the line. I type 430 feet, right? Enter. And notice that it gives me a preview, right? The yellow one. And it's like, hey, person, that's where that line's going to be copied to, right? And I'm okay. I like that. So I left click, right? And I get that. All right. I can press enter. Okay. Now, let's say that I keep going this, right? Now I'm ready to go another distance, right? This is for example, right, where maybe the near drafting aid helps, right? So if I turn it on, near, right, and I place my cursor there, right? Okay, how big is this street now over here, right? 4110. So it's the same, right? I'm just gonna call it that is the same size as this other street, right? Another drafting technique, right? Is like, well, I mean, I can copy it and type 41. But this is faster. If I just type copy, right, select that line, enter, then grab that point as a reference, right, and use that line that I had already drawn there and select that line and just copy it with that reference, right? And I have created that. Okay, right? So again, this area right here, it's very nice. Right? It's very nice in the sense that it's orthogonal, right? It's like great, right? 90 degrees, right? Well, then we'll start getting into some of this funky areas over here, right? And I'll walk you through maybe how to do those, right? You guys want to do some of those? Well, we can, right? We actually can. And again, a lot of this is just good eye, okay? We're doing our best to trace this as accurately as we can. And even if you look at that thing right there, those really don't look like circles to me. Right? Like some huevo estrellado or something like that. Right? Like kind of like there. Right? But nonetheless, right, I'm going to type distance. Now, what would you guys actually measure to actually draw this object right there? Huh? You would measure the middle? How? The middle, how? For the radius, right? So I guess what Luis maybe correct me if I'm wrong, right? So I can click maybe what I think is the center, right? Because we don't have it, right? But I can click there, right? And then measure from there to there, right? So it seems that this little roundabout or whatever that is, right? It's about 68 feet. It has a radius of 68 feet. Seems like it, right? Okay, let's try this, right? So let's type the command circle, enter. Again, we're eyeing it because that's the best thing that we can do right now. So I'm eyeing this, where this center would be, right? And then from there, it's asking me, what's the radius, right? Well, what's that radius? Apparently to my distance, 68 feet, right? Enter, I get that. Again, if you really want to be critical about this, like, no, it's not right. But you're going to spend a lot of time there, right? I mean, again, as long as this looks proportional, right? And with some sense of, accuracy, right? We should be fine, right? Remember that for Rhino, being a digital media course, right? It's more about using the software. But then again, things will start looking off if you start using off dimensions, right? So from there, right, what command could I use to, let's say, draw another outer ring right here? Thank you, Jared. Offset, right? Now, what would that offset be? Distance. I don't know, right? So again, we know, right, that we need to use offset. And if we have used offset before, we know that the first thing that offset is going to ask us for, right, is an object. Right? Then it's going to ask us for a distance, right? So before we actually go into the command, let's actually find out what that distance is, right? So I type distance, and that distance, what is it? Of the street, right? So I go perhaps into that quadrant. Now, again, I can say that that street's about, again, hey, it's about the same size as the other streets that we just drew, right? So that's part of what this exercise is also teaching us, right? I mean, have you guys ever thought about how wide is a street, right? I mean, how wide is a car? So in order to be a 2-lane, 4 lanes, right? A highway, right? So it seems like it is about the same size as these streets right here, right? So with that in mind, we can go back and type offset, enter. Now, notice, right? Inside of the parentheses, right, we have this distance, right? This distance right now is set up to 1. That would be 1 foot, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and click there, right? And offset distance, I'm gonna change it to what? 41. 41 feet, right? Enter, right? Now, nothing really got drawn, right? But I go back to my original prompt, which was select the curve you want to offset, right? So I select the curve. Now notice that I move my cursor outwards, right? And like, ta-da, right? I get that outer ring, right? And get that right there, beautifully drawn, right? I can keep going, right? I can do another distance, right? Because now I'm curious, right? What's the size, right, of this block right there, right? Now, this is where, again, geometry comes into play, right? Because believe it or not, right, it's not the same length, right? From that point to this point, right? And actually, perpendicular to that point, right? It might be a very slight variation, but we need to be aware of this, especially in science, right? That if I pull the distance from there to there, or diagonally, if I do not one that is perpendicular, right, to that circle right there, it will be different, right? As such as if I do a length from this point to this length, you can see how much bigger that would be, right? And that's because of the nature of the circle form, right? So I'm actually going to turn on ortho, right, to rather than enter with my ortho, I'm actually going to enter the perpendicular of both inner and outer circle, right? So I can either go down to my screen, right, and turn off ortho, right, or hint, hint, right, I can hold shift. Shift will momentarily turn off or on ortho, right? Right now it's on, so it turns it off. If it's off and I hold shift, it's going to turn it on. Just like if you guys remember when we're doing a rectangle and we hold shift, what happens? What do you draw? A square, right? So again, I'm going to turn it off, right? And I do a distance again. I do my best, right, to get that perpendicular right there, and I measure there. So notice that I can either click and get the distance on the command bar, or even if you look at my cursor right now, I get a little box. I get a little box right next to my cursor that is actually even telling me right there that distance without even first entering it. And as I move it, notice as I move my cursor, those numbers change. I'm going to go ahead and click so that we see it on my command line, but I like to point that out. So I'm going to select there, right? So it's about distance equals 146 feet. Okay, so we go back to this. Offset, enter, select curve to offset, right? I can select the curve first, right? But it gives me that preview, and that's not right, right? We know that's not right. What's wrong? My distance, right? So I can go into the distance setting and then offset distance, right? Did anyone get that number? 146? All right, we'll see. We'll see. So I type 146 feet, right? Enter. I think you're right, Luis. Yeah, it's pretty right. So I click there, and we have that ring right there. What would be next? Another offset, right? Another offset, right? And I think by now we're like, all right, I'm pretty sure that most of these streets right here are about what? 41, right? I mean, more or less. And if not, you will see it because it will be off when you draw it, right? So I can type offset, enter. I go back to change this distance, right, to 41 feet, enter, right? Select the circle right there and offset it like that, all right? And I can start doing another offset right there, enter, distance, right? You guys want to make a bet? Do you think it's the same size as the other one? We'll bet at Snickers or something. Pretty close, right? Let's try it. I think it was 146, right? 146 feet. Enter, right? And I offset this right there. That's pretty close. All right, pretty close. Now, remember how it started with the manual, right? I think the first part that we started, right? And I think I had two columns right there on the board. One of them was generating or drawing, right, geometry. The second one was editing geometry, right? And that's exactly what we're going to start doing right here. Why, right? Why? Because stuff like that, we know that it's not right. We know it's not like that. but we'll wait for that, right? I like to draw as much as possible and then do cleanup all at once, right? But again, there's some point that there's so much information in the screen that you actually need to take it kind of like in chunks, but we'll see how it goes, right? So let's say that I want to draw some of this other streets right here, right? I mean, maybe this street right there, right? So again, it all starts, right, with a line, right? At least for me, right? So I can type line, right? Enter, and again, right now my near command is on, right? So I can place my cursor, right? Let's say more like there. Now again, my ortho is on, right? So I don't need it on, so I'll hold shift, right? And I'll bring it right past, right? Or you can bring it there, right? We're gonna have to do some cleanup over here, so I'm just gonna do it past, right? And again, this is all personal preference, right? You will all develop your own techniques, so I'm just gonna do a line right there, right? I can do what? Offset right there, so offset distance, right? 41 feet, right? I start doing that right there. I can start doing more lines, right? I have a sort of a dot shape over here, right, of this block, city block right there. It seems that it starts about there, right? So again, hold shift, right? Right now, I like to go outside of the image, right? So I do that, right? I can do an offset, right? Distance. For the distance, right, again, I'm just going to leave it at 41. So I'm pretty sure it'd be something similar, right? So I do that. There's like a little portion right there of line that it's kind of funny, very tiny, right? But nonetheless, let's go ahead and try it. Now for offset, right, I can actually specify my distance. You know how I've been having to measure before I draw to set the offset distance? Well, we can actually set the offset distance inside of the command, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so I have set type offset, right, enter. Now it's asking me to select the curve that I want to offset, which is that one. That is not necessarily right because I actually need it to be somewhere there. So I'm going to click on distance, right, and I can either type it, right, I can type X number, or, right, I can place my cursor right there on that near, right, and bring a line, right, and actually specify it on the screen, right, which is actually about what it seems to be 10 feet, right? So I'll click there. It gives me the line right there, and then I get that, right? Type offset one more time. This distance is one that I have right now memorized, 41 feet, right? Enter, and I start doing that right there. All right. We have more lines, and I have this line right here, this city block right there, right? So this one, for example, it's a call, right? It actually seems that this block actually starts turning there, right? I mean, if I do that, that's actually not quite right, right? So I can actually maybe, well, I can start doing that for right now. Okay, maybe if I start setting these blocks right here, right? What do I mean? Well, how big are these city blocks, right? So offset distance, right? I can specify the distance on my screen, right? That's the offset distance, which seems to be a 148, right? So I start offsetting that right there. From there, right click to repeat the last command, select the object. Now we know that's not right because that has to be a 41 feet, enter. I start getting that. Right click right there. I think now by now we have decided those are 48 feet. Right click, that's the object right there. Remember, I've been going back and click on distance, but I can just type D, enter, and I can type 41 feet, enter, click there. Right? Now, again, right now they're not necessarily meeting or extending the length that they should, but we have commands for that, right? And again, for right now, I'm okay, right, with expediting things a little bit, and let's say that for right now we call it, and that's even like that. Because if you actually even open, right, and I don't think I have the name address, right? We're actually drawing a diagram. We're actually drawing a diagram off of the diagram. All right, what do I mean by that? If I was to actually go into now the satellite mode, we actually start gaining more information about this, and actually things like, for example, right, this round corner right there, we don't get on this kind of drawing there. Right? So little things like that, right? So for right now, again, it is already not 100% accurate, so we can start leaving it there. Let me just go find that corner. Where is that corner? That corner would be off of that little circle right there, that little roundabout. So that would be kind of over here. Oh, this right here. I think it's actually this right here. So that was a little center green area right there, and I think this is the oh, actually you see it's a little curve, it's a little arc, right? This is actually a little arc rather than being a straight segment, right? Which is kind of hard to see right here, right? So let's say I delete that, and I'll go ahead and do an arc, right? So I'll type actually I'll go into the arc menu, and I'm going to use the one that you use to start, right? So I'll do the start right there. Let's say I select my end somewhere over here, and then I give it the belly. Sometimes, there we go. I'm holding shift right there and set it up there, all right? And then from there, I can do an offset, enter 41 feet, right? Start doing that, right? Now, again, I know personally, right? When I started doing this, some of us can have very compulsive minds, right? It's like, oh, it has to be accurate, it has to be exactly on. I understand that. You just need to be flexible with yourself. If not, you're gonna make this assignment a really, really, really long assignment, right? So we have to learn, right? And this actually happens in the practice, right? We have to learn what battles, right, to engage on, and for how far, for how much, right? How much we're willing to, okay, right now I'm trying to do this as accurate as I can, right? But I cannot spend 3 hours just drawing a block when I have a good number of them, right? So again, for those of you guys know that I know we have some of those kind of persons, right? That and then you draw something and you delete it, then you draw it again, and then you delete it again, but it's not accurate, and then you delete it, right? So just maybe be comfortable with calling it, drawing it, moving on. Right? So from there, right, I can do another offset just to close this ring right here. The distance is right, so I'll do that right there. Right. So see, we start getting sort of this mess over here, which is absolutely fine because we're actually gonna be cleaning. Right. And actually, this is a great exercise to start learning how to use the command trim and extend. Okay. So let me go ahead and draw, right, this segment. Oh, even better. How about this? What if I type copy, enter? Right, I'm gonna borrow these two lines, right? Enter. And I'm gonna bring them, right, let's say over here. Heck, why not? Over here as well. Right? And over here and so forth. Just be careful with your O snaps, right? Because they can actually they help us, but sometimes they also can make us do stuff that we did not intend to do. Right? So as for right now, actually, I'll just leave it there. Right? Why? Well, I talked about extent, right? This lines need to connect and need to meet, right, this other one. All right. So what do? Right? I can type extend, enter. All right. Boundary. What's the boundary? Well, that's the boundary, right? Enter, right? And magically, right? Click, 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 right click. We are out of the command. Now this one, for example, right, it actually extends more, right? Like extend, enter, select that line right there, extend that, and extend that, enter. And as you can see, I'm cheating a little bit, right? Because technically that's just being another little curve. Yeah. So, but again, for right now, let's just say that we're moving on with this. For example, this line, right? It's like, oof. I mean, that's really not a straight line, right? How do I know? Because if I type line and I bring it from there to there, I can see that it actually bends, right? So it's actually, right, an arc. I type arc. Actually, no, it's not the right command. That would be, arc start in, right? So let's say that, where was it? There. And then let's say that the end, right, somewhere there, right? And then set that up there, right? I'm gonna type enter or spacebar to repeat that command, right? Start doing this right there. Maybe I bring it somewhere over here, right? Start doing something like that, right? Start doing this right here, and right, and this is where I'm like, is that right? Or I can select this point, maybe bring it all the way over here, and this point, maybe start doing that. Oops. And that's why I mean that the O snap sometimes is not working. And some of these, unfortunately, they do take, like, no, it actually is more than one arc. I'm going to do back, go back, back. Except that actually at this point, maybe I'll just bring it over here. And then maybe this one somewhere over there. Right? And from there, I do another arc. Right? Start point. One right there. Bring it over here. And maybe start doing that. And then from there, maybe I can get me this linear line right there. Right? That I bring all the way over here. Right? And I can do and so I have this line segment that, again, some of us might be like, I don't like that right there, but if from this right there, it looks fine, right? So from there, right, we can start typing offset, right? Distance is correct, or it looks like it might be correct, right? So I select that right there, offset that right there, that right there. All right. Now these things, for example, right? These are really important that we fix, right? So there's this command, right, called connect, right? Select first curve to connect, select second curve to connect, right? And it does that, right? Now here it's actually the opposite, right? They are connected, but they project from each other, right? So what command do we need to use? Trim, right? Correct, right? So I type trim, enter, right? Select both lines, enter. Select the piece that I want it to be gone, right? Click there, and click there, enter. Most of the time, when you're using the offset command like that, you will need to do either a connect or a trim, right? Because those line segments are not joined. Okay, let's start doing that right there. I can start doing maybe some of this, right? Type copy, right? Bring these lines over here. Maybe I'll just bring them there. And notice that I'm not necessarily connecting them yet, but I'm just giving myself that graphic cue. So when I do that, right, and I bring that right there, and I bring them there. And this line needs to meet over here. Okay, I can do that. Type extend, right? Select that line, enter. All right. This one seems to project, let's say, maybe a little bit more that way. So I can do that, right? Extend. I select that line right there. Notice that I can do both of these at the same time. Connect it, right? Enter. I can start doing some cleanup right here. I can type trim, right? Enter. Clean that up. I can do a connect right here, right? For this one, to connect with that one, right there. Now, let's talk about this corner points or this intersection moments, right? And the trim command, right? This is where you're really going to learn how to use trim, right? Because it's a little bit selective, let's put it that way, right? So if I type trim, right, enter, all right, select cutting object, all right? Well, let's do this intersection right here. In this intersection case, right, the cutting objects are actually all the lines that are intersecting, right, such as those, right? So I press enter, right, and I just click on those lines in the center, and they disappear. Now let's talk about this P points right there, or J's right there, right? Because actually, right, if I type trim, right, my cutting objects, right, what are they, right? There are only two, not the three lines, right? So I select those two, enter, and I click there, right click, right? So again, trim, right, it's asking you first for the objects that define the moments where you want to cut, right? And then it's asking you to select the pieces or the portions that you want them to go away, right? So that's how we can start doing some cleanup right there, right? I can do trim right there, select this up right there, do that right there, trim, select those two right there, that right there, and you can see how magically, right, we start seeing some really interesting results, right? This line actually should end there, so I'm going to do a line right from there, let's say to a perpendicular over here. Is perpendicular on, it's off, right? So I'll do a perp right there, and I'll do a trim, right, with these three lines, delete that right there. This line right here, it seems to project from this one, right? So click there, type trim, delete that right there. Okay. So I'll you get the idea, right? But ultimately, right, this is an ultimate practice, right, with copy, move, trim, offset. Oh, how about rotate? Actually, let's talk about rotate, right? I'm going to copy, right, this set of parallel lines off to the side right here. I'm going to type rotate, right, enter, select the lines, enter, and I'm going to rotate them, right, 90 degrees with my ortho on, right? So I rotate them 90 degrees. Why would I do that? Because then I can type move, right? I can bring the set of parallel lines right there, and for example, start maybe testing it, and it's like, hey, it works. Cool. Right? So I can bring those lines right there. I can start typing copy, right, and bring these lines perhaps over here, right? And then from there, right, it's like, city grid, huh? That means that actually they have something in common, right? That means that actually each block is the same, right? Well, let's start learning how to copy with the reference. What do I mean by that? Well, right now, if I type copy, select the objects, and move it like that, right, I'm just eyeing it, right? And right, I'm going to measure, right? Watch my screen. I'm going to measure, right, the size of this block from there to there, 143 and 9. I'm going to measure the next one, and it's about 142, right? So they're right, but they're not exactly the same. How can I avoid this, right? Well, I can copy with the reference. What do I mean by that? If I type copy, right, select the objects, right, and I copy from that point, right, to this point right here, right, and I repeat that operation, right? Now, again, that means that at some point, right, I'm going to be off, right, because my something is not right, either my street or my block, and perhaps I might be off by a couple of inches, but once you start adding it up, right, that's where this happens. I mean, kind of like that, right? It looked good over here, right there, but not so good over here, right? So at this point, maybe I can start adjusting this a little bit by using the move command. Move them a little bit right there, and again, we're trying our best. We're trying our best are doing this exercise right there. So that was rotate. Mirror, I don't think mirror, we use that much in this right here. I can start maybe cleaning up some of this, right? Select trim. I can select all of that, trim that out. Those are enter. I'm missing this other line right there, on Cumberland Street. I wonder if this has a name too. But anyway, all right, guys. So that's the drawing part. Again, you have to understand that right now we are learning the software, right? So it's a meticulous way of doing this, right? It's a tedious way, perhaps, right? That again, once you gain some practice on this, I mean, this kind of drawings, you'll be way faster on this, right? But I find this is an excellent way for you to train in those commands, right? Copy, offset, trim, extend. Don't forget about extend, connect, and so forth, right? Later on, you become really fast. And again, this is where right click to repeat the last command, your friend. This is where ortho, your friend, O-snap, your friend, right? Ends, perpendiculars. What else did we use? Near, I guess. All right. Now let's talk more about the development of this drawing. So we're gonna be using this layer right here that we're doing our grids, or our city grids, our street grid. I'm sorry, right? And later on it'll make more sense, right? But we actually need to make sure that we go back and we actually create a new layer, or a new set of lines that give us the city block in a different layer. Now you might be asking yourself, what do you mean, right? Let me finish some of these blocks a little bit more so I can show you what I mean by that. And it seems that now, right, I realize that the gateway, it's actually a little bit bigger, right? Because if I copy, right, this set of lines, right, from there to there, it seems that I'm actually missing quite a bit, right there. How can I fix that? I can do a distance, right? Let's say, what's the distance from there to there? Let's say 25 feet. So I can type move, right, enter, select that line, enter, move it 25 feet to the left, and I get that right there. Okay. Now I'm gonna do trim right here. Clean some of this mess right here. Let's see, I'm not sure if I should be doing it like this, but we'll find out. You can click that right there, trim that out. Those lines right there. This right here. Those right there. That right there. From here, right, that goes right there. 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 This one, for example, it finishes right there. Say that right there. And this outer circle, let's do it like that, right? I can go back in here, right? Select all of these little lines, right? And delete them, because I don't need them. Delete that right there. Trim out. Select all of the lines right there, because I need them. I can do another trim, right? Select those two, trim that out. I'm gonna do an extend, right? Connect this line right there so that I can do a trim right from there to, that's it. So I can clean that up right there. Select that out, clean that out. Another trim there. I can do an arc right here from start point right there to there. Draw this little kind of curve right there. We're doing trim right here. This is where music is also your best friend, right? Just grooving some tunes right there and just cutting away, right? Cutting away. Oops, not that. So for example, I deleted or trimmed out a portion that I did not intend to, so I can just do Control Z, right, to undo inside of the command, and you should be good, right? To continue, right there, check that out right there, clean that up, enter, good for right now. Okay, so right now this is set up on my street grid layer, right? But I also need my city blocks. And you may be asking, well, Munoz, they're already there. I mean, it's already there. They are, but later on we're gonna move into the 3D modeling part, and actually even before that, the coloring part, and actually one and separate. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, remember about the copy command? And so let's say I select those lines right there, type copy, right? And I'm gonna do in place, right? Copy in place. And right now they are being selected, right? I'm actually gonna change that to be a city block right there, right? And again, it seems that nothing happened, right? But actually now if I click on top of it, I have two set of lines right there, right? And again, it may not make a lot of sense right now, but later on when we get into coloring and to extrusions, right, you will need both of these, right? Because the purple defines the street, inside of the street, and the blue defines inside of the block. So they're quite actually the opposite. Yes, Julio. Yes, yes, yes. And that's where you first want to do your city grid and then your city blocks. No, you don't have to do it individually. Well, you just have to be careful that you don't wanna make extra copies of things that you do not need. You only need to make the copy of the blocks, right? Because at this point, for example, right, which is the freeway, right, you don't need to make extra copies of that, right? So just be mindful about what you're actually making a copy of, all right? So green areas, for example, those are defined differently, right? So let's talk about this area right here, right, which is kind of a mess, right? Really, really mess right there. So I'm gonna go into my green areas layer right there. I can type polyline, right? And again, for right now, maybe I'll just be as accurate as I can, right, without really trying to spend the entire day right there. Right? So I'm drawing this outline right there. Let's say that I bring it over here. That once you start having more information about your city blocks, right, you use that to finish drawing this, right, but try not to show you, right, because then we need to even start cutting some of the green areas that you have, the roads inside of the green area, right. So that point is wrong, so I'll undo, bring it right there, since that we then move over here, over here, there. Bring it. So we have that. Of course, I'm using green, right? So you can't see it because it's on the green right there. But maybe if I make a copy of this right here, right, and bring it out there, that'd be green right there. Whoa, you can't see anything. Well, okay, there we go. Okay. So there's the outline of that memorial park right there. Don't forget that then we need to go back in there, right? And with our polyline as well, or whatever you need right there. Start tracing some of this there. You know what? Actually, I don't know if I would. I would do the major ones right here, perhaps. These ones right here. Okay. So that's the green right there, and again, actually, this line's right way before that. So that was the ref layer, the street grid layer, the city blocks layer, the green areas, right? The amenities. We'll talk about them right now. But before that, let's talk about the distance radius, right? Because this is actually going to help us define exactly how much we draw, right? So remember that we talked about the having, right, your property right there on the center, right, as, of the image, right? So we want to set up a couple of radiuses, right? And we're going to work off of the mile. So the way that we're going to evaluate this is a mile from that point. Right? Mile going in that direction. Right? So that means that this mile turns into a radius. Right? So why does this matter? Right? Well, because we were actually going to show it graphically. Let's get into our distance layer. Right? I type a circle, right? And again, in this case, right, again, I have the point, the Google Maps point right there, which is actually my center of my circle right there. And notice that I do, right, I start making this circle right there. That's why, again, on the board right here, right, we have that 1 mile. It's 5,280 feet, right? We're working with feet, remember, as your unit, so we cannot really type 1 mile, right? That's not the units that we're working with, so that's why we had to first convert it to feet, right? So I can type 5,280 feet, enter, right? And that's the 1 mile radius. Why is this important? Because we actually just want to draw things that are within the 1 mile radius. As you can see then, I actually don't even have to draw Memorial Park. Right. And that is just so that we can actually lower the amount of drawing that we actually need to do. I mean, because some of these can start getting very, very complicated, right? But we actually want to leave a little bit of a margin, right? What do I mean by that? Well, we want to leave, I think I left like 50 feet. Let me see. This is the other drawing I was working with. So I think I left 100 feet. Okay. So I'm going to offset, right, that radius to 500 feet, enter. So I'll offset it there. And what I mean by that is that we actually want to just draw right? Whatever is inside of this radius. Inside, though, in a rectangular form. And I'll show you what that is in a minute. Right, so I'll delete that. And I'll type rectangle. There. So your drawing, right, at the end is going to look like a rectangle, right? But this rectangle size is going to be derived off of that margin right there, right? So let me get onto the screen. So and your final drawing is going to be all from this corner all the way over here. Right? So yeah, perhaps you will have to draw, or I would have to draw a portion of this part right there. Why? Well, actually, right, and actually to realize that it's actually half of my 1 mile radius. So again, you will draw your 1 mile radius as a reference. That again, 500 off of that, I draw a rectangle, and you just need to trace the lines leading this point right there. And anything outside of this, it's fine. And I can stay off of that. So that means that, for example, I can start using this triangle or rectangle right here to start shooting those lines. Right? And getting the boundaries. Question, yes, please. That's a really good question. For right now, let's create that. Let's actually. I think it's a good way of practicing new layers, right? So I think we can do that, right? And actually, we can draw 'em in a different layer, right? So you want to do that maybe, since there's such major components, right, of this, right? We can do, you can even call it like that, right? 10, right click, new layer. I think my mouse just died. New layer. What is this? 540 or featured? Huh? 54. Or is it I? No. Yeah. I 54. All right. There you go. And yes, I say at least about that, because you see how Paisano it's also yellowed out like that, because I think it sees as a major road right there. I think that one can be left off with the street grid. But later on, going back to that conversation about hierarchy, right? Those components, such as the highway, those are going to be represented in a much more predominant way, right? So don't forget, guys, file, save. Right? We don't have to name it anymore because it's already been saved in there. We have set up the additional radiuses that we're going to set up are 1/2 and 1/4 mile. Right? So I can type circle one more time. Right? Select my center right there. Now, what will be my radius for the 1/2 mile? Calculator. Real quick. How do we get this? Paulina's on it. 2,640. 2,640. Enter. All right. Good. One more. What's half of that? Clear it. 1,320. Okay. 1,320. Enter. All right. And again, later on, right, we'll continue adding more to this, right? But that's what this is telling us, right? I mean, oh, okay, so that's my 1/4 of a mile radius right there, 1/2 a mile radius right there, and then my mile, and then everything outside of that. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and click save right here. This recording is already at 1:20 right there, so Is there any questions? I'll go ahead and pause unless there's any questions, so that maybe we can address those right there. Let's see, did we cover everything? Hi, Julia. What size should the map be? That it's driven by what? The scale, right? The scale bar. I cannot tell you, right, a distance, what we can set up, and that's where all of our maps are going to match, because we're actually going to be working off of the same scale, graphic scale, right? So as long as you, and this is the, I say the test, right? This is the test of fire right there. That as long as you type distance, you go onto your graphical scale on your image, and you get something really, really, really close to 1,000 feet, which is what you should. Well, first, actually, let's backtrack. You need to have a graphic scale on your drawing that actually has 1,000 feet like that, right? So that when you measure it, right, you actually measure 1,000 feet, which I just did, right? I measured 1,000 feet and 8 inches. Not a big deal. 8 inches compared to 1,000 feet, no problem, right? So Julia, to answer your question, right, as long as you type distance and the distance that you get off of the graphical scale matches the number on such graphical scale, you should be fine, right? And then from there, how much do I draw? Well, remember, we set up our 1 mile radius. We leave 500 feet off of the end of such radius. We draw a rectangle, and everything inside of this rectangle, right, gets drawn. Okay? Yes, Julian, you're welcome. Another question? Leslie, what was the what? The city blocks. Well, the city blocks get defined by the street grids, right, or the city grid, the street grid. But for right now, they're just going to be overlapping, right? They're just going to be on top of each other. And for that, remember that we did a copy and then in place, copy in place, right? And I can show you, for example, I lost the one that I did. Right? Let me do this, right? Later on, what we'll be doing, right? The right way of doing this, right? We type join, right? We join all of these lines so that they become one single object like that, right? So I can type enter to repeat that right there. So I get that. I'm going to move onto my 3D view, right? I'm going to send backwards my object right there, and actually this one right there. Let me show you right there. Send backwards right there. Select. Even better. Let's actually turn it off. Image. Oh, there we go. And then I make a copy, right, in place. And then that object, I change it to CD blocks. Right, curve right there. And I move it vertical. Right. The reason for that is that you want to have both sets of information, right? In this case, I have in blue, right, the city block, and then underneath it, I have the street grid. Now, I need to do this, I guess, on the board. I have colored right now. But right, we're actually going to assign, right, a color, right, to the street, right, and then a different color to this, right? And we're actually going to extrude them, right? So that's what we need those sets of lines. The fact is that Rhino is overlapping. So you won't see that sort of difference right there apparent on your drawing until you start adding color. So, but it's just remember, as you draw the city grid, the blocks emerge. We just need to make a copy in place. Yep. Let me undo for that. Undo. Okay. Questions, guys? What else? Good. All right. Go ahead and stop this video right here. And again, any other questions, I can address them. Leave it.